This is Solve It for Kids.
Hello, my amazing and curious friends. My name is Jennifer, the Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, and this is Solve It for Kids, the podcast that gives kids and families a peek inside the real world of scientists, engineers, and experts as they solve problems in their jobs using creativity, cooperation, and critical thinking. And now please welcome to the show my podcast partner, Galactic Space Geek, Jeff Gagne.
Hello, Jennifer, and hello, listeners. Well, if you couldn't tell that we are co-hosts on a podcast where we talk to awesome people in all different fields, we love learning, and
Yes.
we have the guest today.
We do. So what problem are we solving today?
How do you hack your ability to learn?
Oh, how do you hack your ability to learn? So we're going to learn all about learning. This is
Yes.
going to be so interesting. Who is our guest today, Jeff?
Our guest today is the very accomplished Dr. Justin Sung. Listen to this, everybody. He is a former medical doctor turned learning coach, YouTuber, and is the head of learning for iCanStudy.com.
Welcome to the show, Dr. Justin.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on.
Well, we are thrilled to have you. We're going to talk about some really cool stuff today. But I like to start out for our young listeners with a question. Did you always know as a kid that you wanted to teach people how to learn and kind of think about it in all these amazing ways?
You know, what's really funny is that when you're a kid, everyone always likes to ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure do.
And, you know, you always feel like, what's the right answer here? Like, what's the answer that I can tell that my parents' friends will feel like,
Yes.
oh, that's such a cool. And so as a result, I think a lot of people want to be things like doctors or,
Right.
these cool professions that sound nice and you get a pat on the back for it. And so I think for a lot of reasons, maybe I ended up going down a path of becoming a doctor first.
Okay.
But then only when I started kind of working as a doctor did I realize I actually had a passion for teaching and education and things as well. So
Wow.
short answer is no, I didn't see it coming. And for all our listeners, I'd say you don't need to have it figured out. At
That's
least
good to
probably
know.
not for the next couple decades of your life. You don't have to have it completely figured out.
Okay, moms and dads, let's give him a little grace on this answer. But that also leads me to, you did become a medical doctor first, and now you teach about how to learn.
Yeah.
Was your time as a medical doctor wrapped around essentially from the neck up, doing brain work, or, were you
No, not
working
at
on
all.
feet?
I didn't work too much on feet, but I was just a normal kind of, I was a junior doctor. So, doing all parts of the body.
Right.
Okay.
It really wasn't anything to do with the medical training. It's not like learning about the brain made me
Right.
really interested in it or anything.
Okay.
I'd actually been kind of teaching and tutoring since I was really, really, really young. Like, family, friends, their kids would come and I
right.
would give them lessons when I was like 10 years old or something. And I'm from a family of teachers. So I kind of in my blood. I kind of
Yeah.
grew up around that. And then when I went through medical school, because you have to study a lot, obviously, through medical school.
Right.
So I got quite interested in learning how to study and learn the right way so that I'm not just wasting time and, having to spend all of my waking hours just trapped in a library, studying furiously. I can
Right.
go outside and enjoy the sun sometimes as well. So that's kind of how I ended up going into this whole learning sphere.
That's so
Okay.
cool. That's great. And so I'm curious, kind of what led you to this? Did you like figuring out how other people learn, how you learn to make it faster? Kind of like what drew you in there?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. I started off just wanting to learn really well for myself
Right.
so that I could have a great life. But then, because before that, it was very sad and dark. But then once I learned the right way of doing it, then I naturally wanted to teach it to other people. And I was really interested in knowing how can I diagnose the problem? for someone
Mm.
else? How can I
Okay.
look at someone else's problems and say, just like how I would in medicine, how can I look at a student's learning issues and say, okay, well, here's the root reason, here's the real reason
Right.
it's something's going wrong. And it sort of fascinated me, and it turns out that there's not a lot of other people out there that are doing that type of work. So I sort of found my calling through that.
That's fantastic.
Okay. I love that. And I'm going to link you back to how old I am. Long back in the day, my dad worked at a community college for 29 years. That was his whole career. He worked in the learning lab. A lot of the students at the college went through, a lot of them were English as a second language to get additional help for what they were actually studying. So I spent a lot of time as a kid at the community college, just in my dad's lab, learning speed reading on his computers and basically playing around with whatever the college students were doing. He bought me a program that I still remember tidbits of to help me study better. Oh, let's call it 35 years ago now, called Where There's a Will, There's an A.
Oh.
And it was videotapes and cassettes,
Wow.
and it had lots of tips and tricks. And I have noticed as I've grown up to become an adult, I have not seen, a full market of products and services that are the how to learn. There's lots of here's what you should learn, but not the how to learn.
Yeah, exactly.
So was there a specific, I know you just touched into that a little bit, but was there a specific thing that happened for you that sort of clicked in your brain that learning how to learn was really your niche?
I don't know if there was something that really clicked. I think it was a really gradual process because I was involved in it for really years and years, trying to figure it out. And your dad would love to know what's happening now. Over the last 30 years, the research on this stuff has just like exploded. So it's not a whole different level; it's a whole different planet of what we know now that we can tell people. So I think the thing that really drew me was when you're working as a doctor. There's a lot of strong focus on evidence, right? Like you need to have the research and the evidence, and that's why you perform surgery this way, give someone a certain medication.
Right.
When I started looking into learning science and education, that level of evidence was not so high. Like there were a lot of people doing a lot of things, not necessarily because there was heaps of good research on it, but just because that's what everyone else was doing. That's what everyone's friends were doing. It was kind of just that's what they're used to doing from their own habits. And when I started looking into the research around it, I actually found that a lot of the stuff that people were doing were like just wrong. Like the research says it actually doesn't work. And that got me interested. So now I think one of the things that really drives me is that I see people doing things in a way that doesn't really work. And then that just makes me really frustrated. I'm just like driven by frustration. It's like, this is a problem I can see, and I'm good at solving it. It's good enough for me. I'm just going to solve this.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that. And thanks for mentioning my dad. I'm actually going to see him this weekend. Guess whose YouTube videos I'm going to show him?
There you go.
He'll love it.
I'm totally sharing. He's going to like it.
So now, like, I want to know. So we're talking about how to hack your ability to learn. Okay. So give me some tips. Now, I will tell you, I wanted to be a medical doctor since the time I was 9. However, I got to the MCAT, and organic chemistry and I do not see eye to eye. And I've heard that that's a common theme.
Oh, that's so. I was just about to say that.
Who are not doctors to this
Dr.
day.
Justin knew.
Specifically, organic chemistry. People say that about. Yeah.
I mean, so what would you suggest? Yeah.
I want to tell all the learners listening, don't be afraid of organic chemistry. You might have heard scary things. You might have heard, the scary things from Jennifer, but, it can be really, really easy if you just know the right way to tackle it. So here's the thing, not just about organic chemistry, but about just how to learn in general.
Yeah.
Is that when you go through school, there's a certain kind of way of learning that you get used to that maybe even your teachers are saying that you should try and do, your friends might be doing. But the issue is that we're learning so much about learning and how learning works. Every year we're learning more and more. And we're realizing that some of the stuff that we thought worked 3 or 4 years ago, we're starting to realize, hey, actually, that doesn't work quite as well as we thought. In fact, there's an alternative here. And
Wow.
so the things that your parents might have done that worked for them, that your teachers did that worked for them, they're not saying, hey, do this because I know it's going to make you fail. They really think it's going to work, but they're not, obviously, it's not their job to stay up to date with this stuff, but it
Right.
is my job.
Ah.
The key thing here is that when you look at learning, and you have to try to keep this mentality, even when you're going through school, is that you have to approach learning like you'd approach solving a jigsaw puzzle. Let me explain what I mean by that. So if you imagine a jigsaw puzzle, like, let's say there's a few hundred pieces,
Okay.
then you've got all these individual pieces and you have to pick up each piece and you got to figure out how it all connects together to form this big picture.
Right.
But there's a strategy to doing jigsaw puzzles. If you've ever done one before, you know that if you sort of start, let's say that you're the image that you're trying to create is like a beautiful countryside and there's, the sky and the clouds and like a little house or something on the corner.
Okay.
If you start in the middle of the blue sky, you're going to have a tough time figuring out the next piece. Like, this blue versus this blue, they look essentially completely the same.
Exactly.
You've got hundreds of pieces to choose from. And so the key strategy here, and if you don't know this tip, this is a hot tip for you.
There you go.
Find the edge pieces. The edge pieces have a straight
That's what
line.
we used to do. Yep.
Exactly. So you start with the edge pieces and that gives you this frame. It gives you a little bit more to work with. And once you've got the edge pieces, then you can build from the edge inside.
Ah.
Okay.
Right. And then now that you've got more pieces connected together, you've got more to work with. The more of the image is there. So, and there's less pieces left inside the box.
Right.
So it's easier to sift
Right.
through them. And then what do? You still don't start on that big blue sky. You
No,
find
the little house in the corner.
You find
That's
the house in
right.
the corner that might have the dog in front or something. That's really distinctive,
Oh, look,
right?
it's the dog piece. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly. And you find the dog piece and then you fit it. And you may not know exactly where to put it at first. It's like, does it go in this direction or this direction?
Right.
You rotate it,
Right.
move. But you generally know that this dog is not likely to be flying in the sky. It's probably going to be, where the other half of this dog is. And then
I'm
and you
loving
can
this
place that
analogy.
piece.
Yeah.
So when you do that, you're in this really organic, very effective learning mode. Your brain is trying to fit together and form this big picture. And that is
Okay.
exactly what it's like
Wow.
when you're learning, is that when you're learning, you're given all this information. The difference, though, is that when I'm speaking, I can only speak one word at a time. When you're reading
Okay.
something, you can only read one sentence at a time. When you've
Okay.
got a jigsaw piece, you've got every piece laid down and you can sort of flick through all of them.
Wow.
When you're listening to someone, you have to listen to it in the order that they're giving it to you. It's imagine getting all the pieces of the jigsaw, but they're given to you in like piece by piece by piece.
Wow.
Now, your job as a learner is not to take each individual piece and try to see how to put that on the puzzle. Your job is actually to take each piece as quickly as possible to still look for the edge pieces.
Yes.
Right. The only
Right.
difference is that it takes a little longer to get all the pieces in play until you can fit it together.
Right.
And so
Right.
that's what we need to do as a learner. We need to see the subject that we're learning as the big picture that we're trying to form. And whenever
Okay.
we're listening to something,
Wow.
reading something, we are looking for the edge piece. We're looking for the piece that for us seems to make more sense, that's easier to fit together. And we want to start there because when we start there, we've got more to work with. And when
Oh
we've
my
got more to work with, it gets easier and easier.
Where were you when I was taking electrical engineering at the Naval Academy? I mean,
have been a fetus.
you may have been. That's
I don't
true.
know.
So it's just, wow, this is like mind blowing to me because the first you have to take, everyone takes a whole year of electrical engineering, even though I was a chemistry major. And the first semester I got a D because it's like this, all of the information's coming in. And then I was dating my husband and I went to visit him over spring break or over Christmas break or whatever, because he was 2 years ahead of me. And he sat down in like 3 hours and explained to me how electrical engineering worked and what it applied to. And I went back and I was like, I got this now. Thank you. Like
Exactly.
So now you're
The
saying
big
he gave
picture.
me the edge pieces, right? I'm gonna tell
Yeah.
him that.
Yeah, because you don't need someone to teach you every single thing. What you need
Oh
is
my
you just need to know
gosh.
how to think about it. You need to give your brain a little bit more direction. You need to give it a little bit more steps to figure
Wow.
out the
Mind
big
blown.
the
Mind
big
blown
piece.
here.
Yeah. But the other thing is, even if you can't get someone to explain it to you, you can still find a way to explain it to yourself. You just got to find a way to make it easier. Like if a lot of the time, the more you study something, you just get more and more overwhelmed because it's like more pieces just being tried to cram into your brain.
Right.
And what that tells me, if you feel that way, is that you're not forming the big picture. Because when you solve a jigsaw puzzle, as you keep solving it, does it get harder? No, it's the other way around.
It's not supposed to.
It gets easier. The only reason it'd be getting harder is if you're trying to look in the box and just try to match pieces together without really forming the picture as you go.
Right.
Wow.
And so this is the key thing is if you're getting overwhelmed the more you study, what you need to do is you need to say, well, am I actually trying to form the big picture as I go? Or am I really focused on just learning each individual fact and trying to understand each individual concept one by one by one by one by one? Because if you do that, your brain's going to have eventually way too much to hold on to.
Yes.
It cannot form the big picture. There's too much going on. Yeah.
Okay. I would like to delve one dimension deeper into that and using your jigsaw puzzle analogy. So let's say we have those edge pieces together and we've started working on the house with the dog out front.
Yeah.
You know, if that house is red, so obviously the color is much different than the sky that is blue and white clouds and maybe green trees. Because obviously, I think a lot of us start to clump those together as well. Like, these are all the red pieces. We know that's the house. Put them in that corner. And somebody gets to work on that part. As you start to sort of clump those things together, does your brain help you make connections between clumps? Like
the answer
from the house
is
transitioning to the sky or the trees?
Yeah, the answer is yes, but you have to be letting it. Like your brain really likes thinking this way. And the most powerful thing here that could hold you back is habit. If you're really used to studying in a certain way, and let's say that the way that you're studying is, I'm just going to listen to this and then I'm going to write as many notes as possible.
Yep.
Okay.
And once I've written my notes, like I'm just going to read through it to try to understand each line by line, as well as I can. You can see how that, even though it seems really natural,
right,
it's actually going to hold you back because, again, that's not helping you to form the big picture. Like you don't actually need to understand everything perfectly at the beginning.
right.
What you need is the big picture.
You
can always
on the pieces instead of the puzzle.
Exactly. So if you focus on the puzzle first, and a lot of people are like, oh, but then I'm going to forget about this thing, or I'm not going to learn it deeply enough. Once you form the picture, you can always go back and focus on all the little details. But now you've got a big picture. Once your brain knows how to think about it, you can go back. You can go back and learn all the little details. And it's going to be much, much easier than trying to imagine exactly what the house looks like when you're only looking at a single piece.
Okay. So
Gotcha.
Can you give us like some specifics? So say some of our listeners need to learn kind of like a difficult STEM topic, not organic chemistry, right? But they need to learn something about physics in middle school or something like that. Can you give them any tips to kind of do stuff like that?
So your teacher in your textbooks or whatever you're using to study, they might tell you about, how these kind of laws of physics work, right? You might learn about some Newton's laws or some, mechanics or something like that. And you might have a few equations that you're learning and you're just given all that information in a certain order.
Right.
Your job is to say, okay, whatever order is given to me, I'm going to take a step back. I'm not going to let the teacher or the book or whatever, not that they're bad, but they're not your own brain. Right. And you got to take charge of it. So you got to take a step back and say, okay, what do I think is really the big picture of everything that's being taught here? Like, where does it all lead to? I'm not focusing on this specific equation. I'm just going to think, what does this equation mean? What's the purpose of it? Why does it matter? How could I use this?
Right.
And then how is that related to this other equation? Why is that one important? How is that one related? And you might think about another concept or another particular, one of the laws. And how is that similar or different to the other law? And how do I use that? Why is that important? And by doing this constant process of thinking, well, why does it matter? And how do I use it? And how is it related to these other things? It's causing us to think about where it fits. And as we continue
Ah.
to do this, as we get a few more concepts under our belt, we start seeing how things actually fit together. And the best part about this is that learning is not a jigsaw puzzle that involves 1,000 or 2,000 pieces. Usually, if you can just figure out what the 5 or 6 big ideas are in a topic, and just
Okay.
how those 5 or 6 big things relate to and influence each other, not just seeing them in isolation, but
Right.
seeing how it all kind of connects together, that alone just completely shifts the way that you see all the other information that sits around it.
Wow.
That is actually, that's the harder part. And that's the part that we got to spend our effort to make sure that we're focusing on. So we're not just going to get sucked into the details. Because if you let yourself, you will just get sucked into every single detail and every
Yes.
single line.
Uh-huh. Sure.
Yes.
So I love the way you are changing the way I'm thinking about
Yeah.
learning, which I'm sure is your purpose. I want to delve even deeper to a specific from your own YouTube channel, which listeners will be sharing. It's great, and they're super fun videos.
Mm-hmm.
There was one that caught my attention from the name, which is excellent. Great job, Dr. Justin. But it's something I think a lot of us that have learned a whole bunch have used, and it was stop relying on recall and repetition. And I think what you were just describing about those big concepts and not
Yeah.
focusing, can you go a little bit deeper on not relying as much
Yeah.
on recall and repetition?
So let's think about this. Let's say we've got the jigsaw puzzle and we're looking at it just piece by piece, right? You haven't
Okay.
listened to this episode, so you're still in that old way of learning.
Yeah.
And so if we're looking at it piece by piece, obviously we're going to get really, really overwhelmed. So let me ask you the question. How many pieces do you need to look at before you start forgetting what their first piece looked like?
Oh.
What, maybe 3,
Yeah.
4 pieces? Honestly, not a lot, right?
Yeah.
Right.
This is the thing. Because your brain doesn't know where to put it, it hasn't been placed in the big picture. It's really bad at holding on to that information. And so when people are really, really heavy into the repetition, what it tells me is that the method that they're using to try to learn is really focused on the piece by piece.
right.
And what they're trying to do to fight
That makes
against the
sense.
fact that their brain is constantly forgetting is that they're every 3 or 4 pieces, they're going back to the first piece to remind themselves.
Right.
Yes.
Every 6th piece, they're going back to the second one, and they're constantly just churning through. But you can see it's not going to work. Like there's a better way to do that. The better way is to say, okay, let's not focus on it piece by piece. So that's the point, is that if we're focusing on getting
Right.
really, really good at doing repetition, we're actually just solving a symptom. We're not solving the disease. We're just saying, hey, your nose is runny, have a tissue, have a tissue, have a tissue, have a tissue. There's only so many tissues you can have,
Yes.
or your nose is going to start
Yes.
bleeding.
Yes.
You know, what you need to do is you need to, take the antibiotics or whatever it is that's going to actually get rid of the disease.
Right.
Ah. So if you go back to like Newton's law, so is it good? Because, when I go and I talk to kids about STEM and I use some of my books and I like to talk to them about Newton's laws of motion, I talk about cars moving. So I have a book called
Mhm.
Save the Crash Test Dummies. And then so they get to see the car, the crash test dummy moving.
Yeah.
And then you explain all of the different forces. Is that's kind of what you're talking about with seeing the bigger picture?
Yeah, exactly. And you can even do that even to a larger scale. It could be like, well, yes, there's these 3 laws, but where do the laws even fit? Like, where's the bigger picture of that? So I think one thing that teachers, at least good teachers, are really good at is they're really good at making things simple when they explain it. They know how to pick the right analogy. They know how to pick the right story, right?
Okay.
And that's really
Yes.
memorable. And that's amazing. But in some cases, it could still be just a piece. It could be a big piece,
Right.
but it might
Right.
still be the piece. So it's like, okay, let's take a step even beyond that and say, well, what's the big picture of everything that we're learning in this whole topic for the next 3 weeks? What's the story and analogy of the whole thing that we're learning? And then how I've been trying to come back to the jigsaw analogy the whole time
Mhm.
as kind of like a frame. Everything that we're adding onto it, let's see how it fits into that big picture. Now, when you're still in school, your teacher might do a lot of this for you. But let's say that your teacher hasn't watched this episode and that they don't know that they need to do this as well, or they just don't have time to think of, changing their lesson to make it all fit.
Right.
if you're listening to this, you probably don't realize this, but your teacher's actually really busy. So
They are, yes.
so they may not have time. So in that case, you have to do it yourself.
Yeah.
Even if your teacher's not making the perfect explanation for you, you got to know how to make the perfect explanation for yourself. And what that means is that one day when someone else is, teaching and everyone around you is really struggling because they just can't figure it out themselves, you can, because you've got that skill. You've developed that.
That's fantastic.
I like the way you're describing that. It puts a lot of personal responsibility, doesn't seem like the right phrase, but it brings ownership of the learning back to the learner.
Yeah, I always say it's practical because it's like, yeah, we all want the best teacher. We all want the best resources. We all want the best environment. But look, let's be honest, it doesn't always happen. And you don't always get a choice. And when that situation occurs, what are you going to do? That's what we got to think about, I think.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay. So you have mentioned a couple of times just how much this area of study and human understanding of this has changed over the last couple of years. Do you foresee that it is going to continue being a sharp learning curve of what we are learning about learning?
The short answer is yes. As it's actually it's getting more complicated and there's more things going on. And that's the reason why I do the work that I do is people don't have time to sit through, hundreds of articles of research to figure out exactly what, one researcher says this and another one says this, who's right, who's wrong. I'm going to do that. And then that's why I want to try to package all of this stuff together in a nice, easy way so that people can just focus on learning the packaged version, not having to, go sift through all the other stuff. And I think, as I said before, the thing that holds people back the most is actually just the old habit. I think this method of learning that I'm teaching, it makes a lot of sense. It's actually pretty intuitive. And actually, this is the way that we kind of learn most things outside of school. It's just that a few hundred years ago, we invented this thing called a printing press. So this thing called books were created. And so it turned out that learning just became synonymous with like reading lines and lines down a book. Right. But when we are learning how to play an instrument or how to play our favorite sport, we're usually not sitting there during practice writing down and repeating lines and lines. Like, okay, I need to move my foot at this angle, at this speed to get, and then after I do that, and then you're like, okay, what was the angle again? And you have to repeat that. Like, we don't do that. It's just about applying this organic way of learning to our studies as well, which is really effective.
That's great. So can you tell us about your I Can Study program and like where people can find you on YouTube and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so if you just search for my name, which is Justin Sung, Sung, on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or wherever you're on, you'll find me. And my stuff is, I try to make it helpful. I don't like spam out random things. There'll be, tips and tricks and techniques and all of the sort of stuff that I'm talking about right now and way, way more. The program that I have, which is a paid program at I Can Study, this is like an end-to-end solution. It's like wherever you're starting from, we're going to get you to become a really, really effective, efficient learner across the span of, 4 months to a year.
Wow.
It takes around 20 minutes a day. And the idea is that by the end of this process, you've, completely transformed. The age that we normally start students on this program is around 13.
Oh, okay.
Because the concepts are a little bit more advanced.
Right.
So if you're wanting to join this, or if you're a parent thinking about getting your kid to join it, remember that age, 13. Below that, honestly, just watching my videos, trying to do some of the stuff that I've talked about on this episode, that's going to be enough. That's going to be amazing. Okay. If I could work with a learner that could think in this sort of jigsaw way to begin with, forget a year, 3 months of work, it's going to be enough. So that's going to make a big difference.
That's fantastic.
Excellent.
So I've learned so much about how I learn. I mean, I wish I had these tapes a long time ago. But we are at that point in our show where we ask our guests to give our listeners a challenge. So what is your challenge for everyone, Dr. Justin?
So the challenge is the Jigsaw Challenge. And this is what I want you to do. You're going to be learning some stuff. You're going to be learning stuff in school. You're going to be learning, whatever it is that you're learning. Right. The next time you go to learn it, here's what I want you to do. The first thing is I want you to take a step back. I want you to separate yourself from the order and the way that it's being taught to you or that it's given to you. And I want you to take a step back. And I want you to try to find what you think are the edge pieces. And here's the thing. I might be wrong. Solving a puzzle isn't about getting it right every single time. You're not a machine that can just scan every piece and perfectly figure
Right.
Put it down, see if it connects. It might not, but it's just an idea. You can always, shuffle things around. And this is the best part about it. The only way you can do this wrong is by not giving it a go. As long as you try to figure it out, try to find the edge piece. Like I said, there's probably only, maybe between 3 to 6 big concepts. Try to figure out what those are and then ask yourself, why does this matter? And how does it relate to the other big concepts?
I like
and
that.
figure out how they connect together. Those are your edge pieces. It might take you 20, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, a whole hour just to figure out those big pieces. And it might seem like a lot of time, but remember that by doing that, you have now set yourself up for success. Now moving forward, you can learn however you really want to, and you're going to have the edge pieces there. Everything from that point onwards is going to become easier, and you're going to feel it straight away. So that's the challenge, the jigsaw challenge.
I love it.
Take a step back,
Love that.
look at the pieces, try to find the edge piece. You can be wrong, but just keep going until you find something that you feel like it fits, and then build out your main concepts, how they connect with each other, and the rest is you're already won.
That's fantastic.
I love it. That's
Yeah.
terrific.
I think that's awesome. So I hope
Yes.
all of you try that out there. That's going to be great. The next time I have a problem to solve, I'm going to think about this too. This has been such a fantastic episode. Thank you so much for being on Solve It for Kids, Dr. Justin.
Thank you, Dr. Justin.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
What a fun conversation. And learning can be fun, i.e., this conversation was super fun. And I love, can't wait to talk about this challenge where he connects whatever it is that you're learning with one of the tips and tricks about finding those edge pieces in what you're learning, what he calls his jigsaw challenge. It's exactly how we solve puzzles, and if we can do that framework of what we want to learn and then fill in all the pieces until we have the info we need, what a different perspective on how to learn a new topic. What do you think, Jen?
Yeah, exactly. And I love how he gives people of all ages a visual in your head, right? Because everybody is,
Yes.
well, not everybody, but probably most people have built puzzles, and
Yes.
you know that it's easiest to start with the edge pieces. So yeah, there was a lot of great content in there. I'm very interested to watch some of his videos and learn more about what he does. So if any of you want to share what your edge pieces are about the content you're learning, feel free to tag us on social media. We are at KidSolve at Facebook, Instagram, and X. You can also check out our website, solveitforkids.com, where we have a page for every single episode, and we'll have links to Dr. Justin's programs and all of these different things, and maybe some tips for how to learn there as well.
And learning more about topics that you're interested in is what the Solve It for Kids podcast is all about, which is what Jennifer and I want you to be out there doing. So use these tips and tricks. Go listen to more of Dr. Justin with Mom and Dad's permission. Learn some more of these tips and tricks. Learn more about the things that you are interested in, because you never know where that's going to lead you. Until next time, you'll hear Jen and Jeff on
Solve It for Kids.